Welcome back. I'm Jen Grice from jengrice.com. I'm a divorce mentor and empowerment coach. And today I have a special guest with me, Pam Carter Samuels from the Coalition of Caregivers. And we're going to be talking about single parent caregiving. And she's going to be sharing her story about how she raised her children after divorce. So welcome, Pamela, to my YouTube channel. Why don't you share a little bit about the Coalition of Caregivers?
The Coalition of Caregivers is an organization that was born out of my own frustrations. I have been part of a support group, a Facebook support group for parents whose children are struggling with some of the similar things that my family has struggled with. And we're always talking in the group about how we wish we could get together. Oh, I wish I could sit down and talk to you. I wish I could just give you a hug, that type of thing. But also my frustration in seeing story after story after story of how families were just in this battle, not only to maintain sanity within their household, but just in the system, the mental health care system. So the Coalition of Caregivers was started as something I call camaraderie and coffee. And that started me meeting with a couple other moms who were having struggles. We'd sit down with our coffee and just talk about our children, things that they had experienced in the system, things that worked, things that didn't work. And because my daughters are farther along in their wellness, I have a lot more time on my hands, and I have a down the road perspective for moms who have youngers. So able to hopefully encourage, primarily just kind of give an ear to hear and no, you've got a tough job and you're doing great. Keep it up. But the other side of that is advocacy. It's really important that we work with providers, not against them, but with them to provide the best care possible for all of our kids. We do have some concerns as caregivers, some of the things that we just don't like. And those are some of the things that we want to be a voice for on behalf of our kids and for other people's kids, because we're not the only ones suffering.
Amen.
So that's how we started.
That's awesome. So what kind of mental health issues, what kind of things are you seeing that parents are dealing with?
Initially, the parents that we have in right now, a lot of them have personality disorders or behaviors that are interfering with school that require hospitalization, or sadly suicide attempts, running away. But that's not all that we're about. We also want to be here for parents and families who think, oh, my kid's just depressed. Well, just depressed is still traumatizing. We have families whose children are suffering from PTSD or complex PTSD, and those can often represent themselves like a personality disorder. So we just really want to be a voice for all families who are struggling or trying to manage and navigate the system with and on behalf of their loved ones.
When you say personality disorders, you mean under like the cluster B personality disorders, like borderline personality disorder, narcissistic personality disorder, and antisocial personality disorder, and those kind of things, right?
Correct.
Just to kind of put it out there for people who aren't sure. And I personally make a distinction between borderline personality disorder and narcissistic personality disorder, meaning the narcissistic personality disorder is way harder to deal with than some of the other personality disorders.
I would definitely agree with that.
Okay. And that goes into your story, right? that's some of the things that you've experienced. So why don't you briefly share what got you to this place, and what the story is behind all of this that you're doing?
Well, personally, and I know a lot of your viewers are going through divorce, or they've experienced divorce, and so that is something that my family and I have been through. I've been divorced since 2008.
What would you say, or when would you say that you had your "I'm done with this marriage" moment? And can you give some backstory about that?
Well, I went into the marriage saying, okay, divorce is not an option. And I touted that. I took a great deal of pride in that divorce was not an option.
Oh yeah, many of us have, haven't we?
Oh yeah. And I will preface it by saying the only people who really understand why God hates divorce can only be the people who have been through it.
Amen. Amen.
If you've not been through it, you just don't know why he hates it so much. And I can say that I don't think there's a single one of us who are happy to have gone through a divorce.
Yes.
We may be after the fact,
right.
And we may have needed that
yes.
to get there.
Yeah.
But it's an awful thing to go through.
Yeah.
My moment, I never actually had okay, I'm done, a moment of frustration where I just quit or decided that it was too much. It was more like an aha moment when I was standing in the kitchen, and one of my girls was sitting at the table in the kitchen, and their dad came in and he tried to hug me, and I know that I cringed. I felt my cringe, and she was watching. After much prayer, it just came down to that I knew I was setting a really, really bad example for marriage. I wasn't the only one setting it. But it was clear that I was the only one who was going to do something about it. So I did.
Yeah.
So when I realized that I was doing more harm staying than just ripping the Band-Aid and taking it for what it was, I told him. And oh my gravy. It was a blame game. It was hard. And my sweet girls, really, the only thing that they asked was who was gonna take care of them. And I told them that they would stay with mommy. So that was comforting to them.
And how old were they at the time?
They were 7.
Okay.
They were 7. After the divorce was final, and the girls and I had moved out of state. But it wasn't long after we had moved that I was getting contacted and told that he was hosting workshops about forgiveness. And he was using my rebelliousness or my horrible ways of taking our girls. And of course, he never said any of those things, because that wouldn't go in line with the whole forgiveness thing. But he was hosting forgiveness workshops, and his big example for how to do that was how he forgave me.
So for divorcing him, or
I don't know. I wasn't in any of the workshops, and so for whatever I had done, I think one of the things that has been really important for him is how he appears.
That's very narcissistic behavior. Just they have an image. They have an image they want to protect, and so hosting some sort of workshop saying this is what I do. I forgave, and my ex-wife hasn't forgiven.
Yeah. And in all honesty, people never said exactly what he said about me. But
you could kind of feel that maybe that's a lot of bad things were being said about you.
The assumption was that I was a wretched woman, or ruthless in a sense. And there were a few people in the community that voiced their concerns to maybe my parents or, to other people around town. And I live in a very small town. about, how could I do that? How could I take those girls and just leave?
Right.
And
you're not
what
alone
I
in
didn't
that.
know is that he signed all the papers. He signed all the papers allowing them to go, and he had liberal visitation. So
Right. And that's typical. I see that a lot in divorces where he may have even filed for divorce, but yet to protect his image and to look good to everybody afterwards, then he puts that image out there that you had to be the bad guy. And I'm sure a lot of women who are listening and watching right now can probably relate to that. So thank you for sharing that.
yeah, one of the things that my mom said when I made it clear that the marriage was over, and she said, no matter what you do, people will blame you. And I thought, no, clearly somebody else is the problem here. And there were people. Now what's been beautiful in that story is that I have had people come back to me years later and say, I'm so sorry I didn't treat you kindly, I had no idea. Right. So that was huge, and it was a beautiful way for God to redeem the moments.
Right. And just to make a side note, we're not explaining everything that you went through in your marriage, because it's just kind of the common story that everybody has. Every woman probably watching right now had the same story, so we're not going into detail about that
Right.
part of it. We just assume that we all have the same story and we all can relate. And now you're divorced and free, and you do great things in the community, and you also share about your struggles with raising your own daughters. Please tell me more about that part of your story.
The girls began exhibiting some emotional behaviors that at first I was like, oh, this just a teenager or preteen, maybe normal single parent, we're away from family, those types of things. But they just progressively got more challenging. Without telling their entire story, we've had a lot of hospitalizations, both of them being hospitalized for suicide attempts, threats, suicide ideations, having called the suicide hotline, drug issues.
Beyond the normal teenage.
Beyond the norm of, just, oh, well, I'm going to make a bad decision here or bad decision there, or I'm, oh my gosh, I hate my hair today, I'm so ugly. It was way beyond that.
And like we were talking about with the group that you're in, that a lot of the parents are dealing with all these different issues. And like you said, it's beyond the normal teenage stuff. It's big things like trying to commit suicide, cutting, self harm, self-sabotage, rage, destruction of property. I'm just trying to list all the things, without sharing your daughter's story, just all the possibilities.
Now, I will say that, and I did share this, that initially it was believed that the girls had borderline personality disorder. Now that they are adults and have been reevaluated, or one of them has been reevaluated, and that psychologist says to take the BPD off the table, because based on their childhood, that they have complex PTSD.
So do those have same symptoms then?
She said it presents very much like borderline personality, even in the essence of a quiet BPD and the noisy, because one is very self-reflective and really does focus inward more, and the other one will tend to have her, when she gets upset, it was much louder. And
is this what you experienced with your daughters? Or
with my daughters? But it very much fit, and so I think that's why initially the psychologists and the psychiatrists were ready to land on borderline personality disorder.
So the complex PTSD comes from living in an abusive environment, like when they were younger?
It comes from childhood trauma.
Okay. So what age would you say that you started seeing the symptoms of either what you thought was borderline personality disorder or the complex PTSD? What age do you think that was?
I think looking back, I could probably pinpoint around the age of 9 or 10.
So it's like a year or two after your divorce?
I probably could look back then and go, oh, okay, yeah, that wasn't quite normal behavior. Things that got a little scarier. I was a teacher at a private school, and the girls were at the school with me, and we were about to go on spring break. I believe it was their freshman year, and the head of the school called me to her office and shared with me something that a student had, or a parent had brought to the attention of the school, because another student showed the parent, and it was that one of the girls had talked about killing herself and was talking about self-harming. They brought me in on it, and they wrapped me up in all kinds of love and support. That's when it first came on my radar that there's something really serious going on here. Probably 3 months later, that child did attempt suicide, and she had a couple more after that. I can remember, and then with her twin, these girls are twins, at one moment after the second hospitalization at a behavioral hospital, and the discharge and the intake sit in the same room. And I can remember sitting there getting ready to take my daughter home, and across the room, it was a small room, was a mom and a daughter who was curled up in the chair. And the mom looked at my daughter, just so desperately asked her, "You're okay now, right? Everything's going to be okay. You're good now, right?" And my daughter responded, "Yeah, I'm okay." All I remember thinking was, I can't break her heart by telling her it was her second time there. And I certainly have thought about her, and she's been an inspiration to me on wanting to be there for other parents and caregivers who are struggling, want so desperately to hold on to hope. And to have to do it, that there wasn't anybody for me to share the experience with. It was all of the decisions I had to make on my own.
Right, because you're a single mom at that point, right?
Right.
How did you co-parent and communicate? Because I know that's what a lot of women are experiencing right now, that they're divorced and trying to co-parent, probably with a narcissist, and then they've got their children who are going through mental health issues. How did you navigate that?
I did it reluctantly, and I will say, looking back, I probably could have managed a little better, but wisdom is in hindsight. I think that I resisted contacting him, but they were on his insurance, so at some point he was going to see the insurance claims. But other than that, also just out of basic humanity and knowing that he was their dad, and that in his way he loves them, and at that point not wanting to not support that relationship. But I would call him and just kind of give him the facts and say that, this is where she is, this is how long she'll be there. He always asked for the contact information, wanting to be able to speak to them, but he also hadn't been there to admit them. And so they had the right not to speak to him. But most of the time they would allow for him to call. A lot of times when it was just the two of us on the phone, and they would turn into arguments. One time when I had to call and say that one of the girls had gone to rehab, and she took it upon herself. And so I called to let him know. He said, what boy gave her those drugs? And I thought, yeah, this is,
that's not helpful, right?
It's a little deeper than that.
Right.
And I said, she made this decision on her own. She chose this, and just equally she has chosen to get better.
Right.
So
and then now she chooses, or at some point she chose what kind of relationship she has with her father. Both of your daughters, obviously. Like I said, we're talking about twin daughters. So we don't want to lump them together. They are individuals.
They
had similar stories, so it can be easy to kind of lump them together, I'm sure. But you allowed them to kind of make up their own mind. And how easy was that? Or how did you navigate that?
Well, that was hard. And I will say that I did get a lot of support from my mother. Was very supportive. But as far as letting the girls come to their own conclusions, I hid a lot from them initially, a whole lot.
As many of us mothers do.
And in therapy, through the course of therapy, one of the girls' therapists looked at me and said, they're old enough that you have to stop hiding the truth and let them make the decisions knowing the truth. You don't have to go back. You don't have to explain all the details here and there. But if they ask, be honest.
That's smart, in my opinion.
It was smart of her. It felt like it freed me up a little bit to at least be honest. And then came the challenge of, resisting. Oh, let me tell you.
Right. Oh yeah, we all experience that as well. But I think you're just saying, though, you just, came from a Christian perspective, that you just, kept kindness, had the fruits of the spirits,
right.
but always being honest with your children at that point to say, yeah, I'm not going to cover. I mean, would you say that's I'm just not going to cover for him anymore. I'm not going to lie for him. I'm not going to change the narrative to make him out to be something he's not.
Right. To spare that. And, so moments when he hadn't, set aside enough money to pay for their airfare to visit him, he had to accept responsibility for that. And one of the girls called him on it, and, I was very proud of her. It hurt to see her actually get that frustrated with him, but it also made me feel good that she had a voice.
Yeah.
And that she was using it.
Right. I think that's what we kind of do as moms, is we try to protect our children from being hurt, but then we end up being hurt when we're found out to be liars for protecting our children, or, we protect them so much that when they do experience hurt, it hits them a lot harder than, if we just let them experience it when they need to experience it, and that kind of thing.
Yeah. And I always tried to frame things for them in the context of, this is how he was raised, his parents, there were some things that maybe they should have done differently with him, because his values are different. Ultimately letting them make the decision even now on what that relationship looks like. So I haven't even communicated with him for several years now.
And how old are your daughters now?
They're 20.
20. Okay. So how would you say that you've transitioned your daughters into adulthood and what they're doing today?
Well, one of the things when they weren't adults yet, was it was so important for me that they had voice, that they knew how to advocate for themselves, that they knew how to take care of themselves, that they kept their relationship with each other strong, because one day mom wouldn't be around. So they saw me, advocate for them and in front of them, giving them the actual vocabulary. And of course, I didn't just magically have that. I did research. At that point, there was no support group that I was connected with. I didn't even know anything existed. All I could do was either take the word of the professionals and a lot of prayer. And then again, research. And I tried to make sure I researched all sides of an issue. So all sides of the medication issues. I wanted to know every single side effect. I wanted to know everything. I think that has really helped them at least have the vocabulary and some of the knowledge and how to speak up for themselves, and the heart, the rare heart of a lovely psychiatrist who stopped and listened to me as her mother, even though she was not a minor anymore. And then with her sitting there saying, is what your mom's saying true?
Each child, each person should look at their mental health differently. And like you said, advocate for themselves, advocate for our children if they're, especially if they're under 18, and give them a voice.
And be informed, because sometimes there are medications that have worked for some people, beautifully, and a doctor may not know about it. And so having that information and remaining in contact with other caregivers and other parents is great, because you could see somebody go, oh, my child had a great deal of success on this particular medication, and then take that information back to their doctor and say, I know somebody who's doing this, and they say it works, and then working that through with their physician.
Probably just picking the best course of action for each individual person. So you were talking about how while your daughters were teenagers, I'm assuming, they were dealing with like risky behaviors, the suicidal ideology and attempts. How did you stay sane and keep yourself grounded during the drug use and risk behaviors, besides tears and anguish? And lots of prayer, of course.
Obviously. Lots of prayer, lots of face down on the carpet prayer. Times that I would be up all night long, and just for my own sanity, putting worship music on and just worshiping until I could feel peacefulness over me. And I don't think we should underestimate that in times of extended crisis, the value of numbness, that it's almost like God's grace to just numb us to some of the things. I think that between 1 and 3 were the peak hours of crisis. And as a single mom, being at the hospital and not having, while I had very supportive people, I still had a job to do.
Right.
It grew increasingly challenging for me to take off every time there was a crisis, because it was happening so frequently. But being in the emergency room and having to leave my child in the emergency room, knowing that by the time I got to work in the morning, they would either be transported to a behavioral hospital, and I just had to go to work. And so I would go home, take a nap, take a shower, and go teach class. And honestly, it was diving into the joy of my students that kept me grounded. I can only remember one time where I had to step out of the room and say, excuse me, just a sec, and step out and go, I'm okay. Lord Jesus, help me. I'm okay. Whew. All right. And then go back into the class. And so it was a lot of prayer. It was spiritual warfare on their behalf and on my behalf. As a single mom, I couldn't afford therapy. So it was finding somebody that would pray with me and not tell me how to fix the problem, because I knew what I was doing was all that could be done.
Right. That's awesome.
But those types of things, that's what kept me sane. And God, all of it was God's grace.
Right. So I hear a lot of parents struggle with like letting go, or just backing off, as they call it in some of these groups, with personality disorders. So, can you explain that? Like, how do you do that? Like, what's involved in that?
Well,
did you do that with your daughters, like the backing off thing?
Well, I'm still mom, and I'll always be mom. And so in moments of crisis, as much as I think, oh, I got to go on with my life, I've got to build a life, but I'll also never not want to be called in a crisis.
Yeah.
But to emotionally safeguard myself,
yeah,
of all the possibility, because it's hard when you've got children who don't want to live. You have to come to the realization that if they want to die and they make a plan, they actually may go through with it. And I came to the radical acceptance that I could not choose life for them. I couldn't force them to live. I could not be with them 24/7. And that if they truly were going to do that, that there probably wasn't anything I could do about it. And that I just had to find some kind of peace in it. Now, that doesn't mean that I still don't struggle with it. Once suicide enters your world with your children, it's a filter that will never, ever, ever go away. So, I'm still learning I still have to revisit radical acceptance.
I love that idea of radical acceptance. It's definitely something that I've embraced and have been learning in the last year or so.
From personal experience in during prayers, in pleading for God to just make it stop, whatever they were doing. If they were hanging around somebody that I knew was trouble, that was probably one of the ones, and just saying, please get this person out of their life. Please just protect them, set their minds right, set their hearts towards the things of you. Just all of these things, and getting frustrated because I felt like my prayers weren't being answered or even being heard. And then one night, just that still small voice says, you have your journey and they have theirs.
I love that.
And I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah. But that's so true. That's true. It is hard. I think that's why we have to call it radical acceptance, because it is radical. It does seem like it is hard. It seems so counterintuitive to what the normal way a parent would do things. Most parents jump in like, okay, let me rescue you from all these bad people. Let me rescue you from this drug abuse. Let me rescue you for thinking that you have to commit suicide. Let me do all these things for you. And when it doesn't work, then we have to come to that radical acceptance of, okay, I can't fix this. You still love them. You still care about it. It's not that you don't. They need to fix it for themselves. God, I hope that's not what's going on right now, but I'm going to radically accept that whatever is going on right now, that you've got this under control, that I can step back. I can continue on my path. They continue on theirs. And God, please tell them just to text me.
Yes. And it's also not, okay, well, I'm going to radically accept it, and then I'm going to sit here and be really stressed out over it.
Yes.
It is truly a diligence. Scripture says we're not born with the spirit of fear.
Right.
But of power, love, and a sound mind. And that is what you have to hold on to as a parent, as anybody. But as a parent, when your child has a suicide, especially multiple times, that you have to get there and just tell fear, no, boo-boo, you gotta go today.
I love that.
A strong mind. I have a powerful mind. I have a peaceful mind. I have the mind of Christ. I am at peace. I am okay. They are okay. And even if they're not, it's okay.
Right. That Romans 8:28, God works all things.
Yes.
So even if they're not, God's going to work it some way. Yeah. And we don't make any light of any parent who has lost a child to suicide, because that's most difficult.
It is.
But we hope and pray for them that God is working that out for good as well.
Yeah. Because it is truly the greatest fear, our biggest nightmare. And the one thing that we probably think, okay, I'm putting a period. I'm done myself,
So and we don't want that. And so that's where your organization comes in, right? That's where you step in and say, I am here to help you get through whatever it is you're dealing with your child.
Yes. We're just parents.
Right. So kind of like a peer-based group.
It's definitely,
which is so needed.
We're all in this together. No judgment. I'm extremely blessed that my girls never spoke to me the way that I know some parents have been spoken to, and everybody has different stories and different degrees and varying degrees of severity, but it's not a case of, oh, well, you got it easy, your kid's just depressed. Wait till they are hauled away in handcuffs. Then you're going to be glad. You're going to wish your kid was just depressed. And that's not it. It's that every family that is struggling with a loved one or child, adult, or minor with a mental illness, it is just hard.
Whether your story, you think, well, it's not that bad, somebody has it worse, it doesn't matter. It's still a hard thing to deal with, and that's what we have to remember. So it's always good to have support groups, advocates, and people who are, no matter what is going on, that there's somebody here to help you through it.
Yeah, definitely. It's really important to come out of the shadows. Or when my story is, as a caregiver, started coming out, how many parents, particularly moms, came to me and said, thank you for sharing that. Our family is struggling. And they had very involved, both parents. And so it doesn't matter what the home looks like. Just because you've gone through a divorce, you can't blame that for the condition of your children.
And divorce might be part of it, but it's not the whole thing. You're saying that married couples still have children with the same kind of issues. It's just a piece in the puzzle that you got to put together.
Yeah, and we don't get to see what the big picture looks like.
Right.
We our piece, we steward it with the best knowledge and wisdom that we can.
Well, I thank you, Pam, for coming on and sharing all this great information and your story and what you're doing with the Coalition of Caregivers. Tell me where people can find you if they say, I need this kind of support. Where should they go to find you?
Well, we do have a Facebook page. It's the Coalition of Caregivers. We're still just a teeny little group, and so we really want to grow. We want people to feel free to reach out to us on the Facebook page. Messages will be answered, just so that you know you're not alone. It is an open group. It's a public group.
I'll leave the link to your Facebook page, and then they can connect with you through there. And you probably offer resource to, if they're looking for a group or if they're looking for something, that's something also that you do on your Facebook page.
Yes.
And point people in the right direction.
Right.
You have a lot of wisdom. So, well, I appreciate, again, you sharing all that. And so make sure, if you are looking for help in this area, parenting a child with mental health issues, go ahead and check out Pam on her Facebook page. So thanks again, Pam. I so appreciate you. All right.
Yeah, take care. Bye-bye.